Hello there, Lotr SBG team fans and SBG players. We are back for our fourth rendition of the Army Review series. So I'll start off by apologizing. This series is long overdue for its fourth update. I think my last one I did was back at the end of October, and since then we've had 3 holidays, and I've lost my job. Got a new one, thank God for that. And then also lost a computer. So it's been a hectic 60 plus days here in the last few months. So that's why we are delayed in bringing this newest edition to you. So today we are going to be covering Angmar, as that is one that was requested. And I say we because we are bringing on our first co-host, and I have none other than our own channel. You're not a subscriber, Joe. Well, I guess you are, but channel lead, Joe Keller. So, hey.
Hey, how's it going, everyone?
Yeah. So we're talking about Angmar today. It is one that has been requested. Joe and I have multiple games worth of experience playing against Angmar. Many events. How many times have you played it, Joe? Like 3 or 4?
3. Yeah, and I've dabbled in playing it before. It's just a lot of the models are out of print currently, so so
it's definitely an army that has over the last couple of years reared its ugly head, so to speak, due to the fact that the new meta with terror armies has really come into its own, I think.
I know the Australian, I think Kylie placed first the Articon with Angmar.
Yes, I think Kylie placed first, like you said, and from there everyone kind of did the whole copy and paste, and that the biggest form of flattery is by what do you call it? Mimicry. Yeah, mimicry is the biggest form of flattery. So there you go, Kylie. Thanks for unleashing that upon the world. But hey, it's fun to play against. I'm not gonna lie, Joe. I think both of us have looked at playing it as well.
Yeah, it's a very it's a very unconventional army in terms of like how most other armies operate.
Yeah, it's if you guys have watched the series, and I highly recommend you do, especially for the fiefdoms. I've talked about synergy, and Angmar is really one where you have to have your synergy working in complete sync, so to say. If you don't have that synergy, you got to find how the different abilities and special abilities of all the models work together in order to really make the army work. Now, you can play this army as a brute force because there are models in here from folks like Gulliver and Berdur and just the Cave Troll, where you can throw a bunch of brute force models in there. But I think how we currently see it is the terror leaning aspect with a shade, with bar rights, with specters and stuff like that, and they're just maximizing. And ring race, of course, maximizing -1 with harboring of evil, and then all the scary stuff that goes with that. I think that's the biggest thing. Wouldn't you say, Joe?
Yeah, it's like I think I've heard it said like this. Because the army pretty much consists of orc warriors and warg riders.
Yep.
The buffs that your heroes give, like in terms of the army bonus and in terms of like all those special rules you get, like the shade, they make your regular orc actually very, very viable in terms of what it can do.
All that synergy that we were just speaking about really makes it where that normal fight 3, strength 3, defense 5 orc actually goes from being cannon fodder to being able to hold its own. So
it can go toe to toe with like a Iron Hill shield wall, for instance, or something like that.
Yeah, just because of the fact that things like the Tainted and the what's it called, the Shade really hurt that. So we're gonna go ahead and do like we usually do, guys. We're gonna start with the heroes, and then we're gonna work our way through that, and we'll probably get through the warriors really quickly in this section because there's only 5 of them. I think we've already talked about all 5 of them without going into deep specifics.
Basically.
Yeah. So we'll go through the heroes, the warriors, and then currently there's no legendary legions for them, unless I'm missing something.
No, there currently is not.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Hopefully, maybe we'll see something in the future with like, maybe the Fall of Arnor or something like that, and Angmar gets a buff. And I'm sure people out there going, no buffs for Angmar.
Yeah, they could. I've been playing a lot of the Rise of the Witch King Battle for Middle Earth.
Oh yeah.
And there are like Wildmen from Rundower and stuff like that, so I could see that being in the future possibly for Angmar.
There you go, guys. 2006 RTS game shout out right there. Still able to play it. We still do.
So I guess the first profile I'll go over this one because I've played him quite a bit, is the Witch King of Angmar. He's a hero of legend in this list. So the thing about this army is, well, I'll go into that in a second. Anyway, so the Witch King of Angmar, normally when I take him, he can take a lot of war gear options. So he can take a Armored Fell Beast, Crown of Morgle, Armored Horse, Morgle Blade, Two-Handed Flail. So if you give him a Fell Beast, it's just a Fell Beast with defense 6. If you give him the Armored Fell Beast, it gives him defense 7. Now, I actually tend to just put him on a regular Fell Beast to save like points costs, because it's actually a pretty substantial point increase to take him on an Armored Fell Beast.
Yeah, you're talking about 3 or 4 warriors. Just to upgrade, just to upgrade from the regular armor.
He can take the Crown of Morgle, which I always give him, even in the last edition. In this edition, the Crown of Morgle gives him his attack value is 3, so he gains 2 attacks in his profile, and it gives him the ability to re-roll casting to cast and to resist, which in my opinion is a very like, why wouldn't you take that kind of thing, especially for the points cost it is.
Yeah, it's not really that expensive to do that.
No,
it's definitely worth it.
No, I always take him on a Fell Beast. I rarely put him on a horse. I've never put him on a horse, but I can see him being on a horse a viable option.
Yeah,
especially in this list if you're trying to save points for other things.
It's actually funny you were saying that, talking about the Fell Beast, and then you mentioned adding on the Crown of Morgle to make his attack value 3, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, I've never really thought about putting him on a horse or an armored horse, because you do either with him. But if usually you put him on the Fell Beast, a Wraith, in order to buff their attacks to 2, so when they charge they get 3. But if he's got 3 base with that Crown of Morgle, you could put him on an armored horse.
You could.
Yeah, then you'd still be able to charge in, getting 4 attacks. The thing you would lose is obviously the 12-inch fly and some of the brutal power attacks. But depending on how you wanted to play it, that could be actually a way to look at it.
No, yeah, I've seen a few like battle reports where people take him on a horse, and with the Crown of Morgle, he still hits hard. He's 4 attack on the charge.
Mm-hmm.
And one reason why I think that the Witch King is good for this list in particular is because he has the ability to heroic strike. Now, of course, we'll go into some of the other things later, but I think the ability to heroic strike and have that magic ability and the number of attacks he can get is pretty good, especially if you have to fight heroes like Gilgalad or Elisar or something like that.
Yeah, he's got a large number of heroic actions too. You want to go through?
He does. Yeah. He has heroic resolve, heroic channeling, strike, strength, and challenge, and all those are ones that are really like good, especially for what he can do. Because like channeling, you can heroic channel I think all the wraiths have channeling, but channeling basically means he can heroic channel his spells, which is good, especially if you're trying to like channel a transfix or a black dart on someone. Heroic challenge is good because it's good. He's a hero of legend, but considering like there's some weaker hero legends in the game, he can charge in and challenge and maybe get mine. Yeah, strength is good. I think strength would be good if you put him on a horse, because the Fell Beast, he gets the Fell Beast strength. So if you put him on a horse, having heroic strength is good, and heroic resolve is good for fighting other casters or Gandalf or someone who wants to try and banish all the spirits in your army. He'd be a good resolve.
Having heroic resolve on himself, along with the fact that if you give him the crown, like we were saying, now you've got 2 free points and you get to re-roll one to cast and resist. You're talking about a lot of free will right there.
Yep.
I mean,
and normally also when I take him, I forgot to mention, I normally take him fully maxed out with his Might, Will, and Fate. Forgot to mention that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then he has, of course, the key one I was talking about, heroic strike, which means in a fight he can buff his fight value d6.
Yep.
So,
And
which
that
is
can be
also
really good, especially if you combo it, like we were saying earlier. We're going to get to it, but the synergy with this list. Remember, he's a hero legend, so if you take him, he's got to be your leader. There are no other
yep,
hero legends. We'll go ahead and
yep.
just preempt the whole list army review by just saying that. So he's going to be your leader. He's going to get that free auto pass for his first time you're broken, but having basically maxing him out. What is he? Almost 200 points or something like that. Fully kitted, I think.
With the Felbeast and all that, yeah, he's over 200 points.
Yeah, I think he's like 250, 220,
Yeah,
230.
he's close to it. Yep.
Yeah, but I mean, again, so have you ever taken him with the flail?
I've never given him the flail. I just don't see. I don't see it because it's a two-handed weapon. Even in the last edition, I never took it
Mm-hmm.
just because getting that -1 to your dice rolls when you fight.
Yeah.
Especially like I said, because the Witch King, he has 1 wound, so if he takes the wound, he's gonna be your leader. You want him to win the fights. Basically, that's the way I see it. If he has a two-handed flail, maybe because he also has a sword in his profile, so maybe in key fights you can use his sword, and if you're fighting like a big hitter, then you can combo. But I can see it being a good option. I just never give it. I save the points for other things.
I never do it either. And as you know, I've played Azog's Legion, Azog's Hunter a lot, and even with the Azog's Legion being able to take the two-handed flail, I never do it just because of the fact that he's got the Burley, Azog does, if I remember right, so he's not going to take
He
that
does.
-1.
Yep.
But taking that -1 to the fight value is huge.
Yeah, it is.
I've never taken a flail in any ability ever.
Now there might be someone out there who watches this video, someone and has taken it and has like one turn killed a Moomok.
Oh
well,
yeah.
that's another thing. The top I forgot to mention is Morgle Blade.
Yep.
I actually know quite a few people who take the Morgle Blade just because you can one shot. The Morgle Blade means if you wound a model with it, then it loses all of its wounds.
Yeah. That could be huge against something like Smaug.
It could be, and I think the rule for instant death things like Smaug or Moomok is they take half their wounds.
Right.
But getting rid of 10 wounds or 5 wounds or whatever in one fight can be make or break deal.
I mean, think about it. The guys that are big for that, you're talking Smaug, not so much, but like a Moomok or Belrog. Belrog's the common one we see now. If you
Yep,
can
we
go
see a lot of them.
if you go in half wounded, you just stolen a few VPs, and then not only that, it might be a lot easier to kill now too.
Yep. So in terms of the Witch King, just to clarify for everyone, normally when I take him, I fully max him out with his Might Will Fate because you want him. He's gonna be your leader. You want him to survive. You want him to be able to cast and fight and lose the will for fighting. You want to be able to roll as many fate as you can because he has 1 wound. And then I normally give him a Felbeast and the Crown of Morgle. But honestly, all of his war gear I can see being viable. It just kind of depends on how you want to build him and what you're going to want to use him for.
Yeah, he's very, what do you call it? Moldable.
He's versatile. Yeah.
Yeah, he's moldable. You can mold him to how you want him in this list. Again, someone could be. This list Angmar is one of those ones where you can build it different ways. You can get the synergy going, where you could again put him on a horse and give him that Crown of Morgle to have the 3 attacks, and then he's going to be a little bit easier to hide because he's not going to be on that giant Felbeast sitting 6 inches up in the air on that little plastic peg that always breaks.
Yep. So that's basically the Witch King, Jason. If you want to hit the other profiles real quick.
Yeah, sure. So we got There's actually 2 other wraiths that are possibilities to take in Angmar, and it's the Tainted and the Dwimmerlack. And I'm actually going to cover the Dwimmerlack first, just because I think he's kind of the one that's not really ever used. He's a hero of valor. He's got no might. He's got pretty good amount of will. He's got 16 and then 2 fate. So I've tried playing with the Dwimmerlack before, and the fact that he doesn't have any might is really a big, detractor to him. So he does have that. His special ability is what you take him for, which is what all the name race have, and that's Sap Fortitude. And you have to pay the point of will to activate it. But every time a hero model within 6 inches of him spends a point of might, will, or fate, you can spend your point of will, and if you do so, your opponent has to roll a d6. And on a 4-up, they have to spend twice the amount. So they have to spend 2 of whatever they're using. So they have to spend. They're trying to use 1 point of might. They need to spend 2. 2 point of will to cast something. You got to use 4. So on and so forth. If they don't, then it's canceled, and anything that they have committed to it so far is lost. So say they're trying to throw 2 will at a spell, and you roll your d6 because you've used Sap Fortitude, and it goes off, but they've only got 3 will left. Well, they've lost both of them, and they can't channel it, or can't cast their spell. So it's pretty good.
Yeah. So here's the thing with the Dormalac and me is in this list, this particular list, like Angmar army,
Yeah.
I can see him being viable because he's a support hero.
Mm-hmm.
I could see him being viable for your big hitters like Gulliver or Birder.
Mm-hmm.
So, like for instance, you charge Gulliver into LSR. LSR rolls the strike. He uses 2 might. Let's just say it goes off. So now you're talking about Aragorn. Let's just say Aragorn had all 3 of his might. Now he's down to 1 might. Or let's just say he uses reoccurring. I think we've said like if he uses reoccurring, then he still has to burn 1 out of his pool.
Yes, that's correct. Because you are still technically using a point of might. You get a free point. Yeah. That's all.
So I can see the Dormalac being good for burning big heroes down for your heavy hitters to have an easier time fighting them.
Yeah, I don't think I would. Go ahead. Sorry.
That being said, I don't know because he has no might himself. This army, I think, doesn't have a lot of might attached to it in terms of like what heroes. I think probably you're gonna get 9. If I'm thinking you're probably gonna take 3 heroes, you're probably gonna have 9. I don't think Barrowlight have might.
No, and that depends on what heroes you take.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're taking Gulliver, Birder, and the Witch King, then yeah, you'll have 9. But if you're going with the way that most people are building it, including Shades and Barroids, you're probably going to have 6. So,
yeah, and being able to burn your opponent's resources with him is really good. But it's also not in stone that's going to happen. You still got to roll a dice.
Yeah.
You still got to get above a 4.
And
so I mean
he is pretty expensive to include in just for that. So
he is.
I don't think I've seen anybody take him for Angmar.
Yeah. I didn't realize like his profile. He has a 2-handed sword. So then, if you want to try charge him into a fight, he's gonna get -1 to his dice roll.
Yep.
And
unless you put him on the Fellow Beast.
Unless you put him on the Fellow Beast, and he only has heroic channeling. So if he charges into a fight, you gotta make sure he's in a fight where he can
win.
Yeah.
Maybe 1,000-point game because those are kind of becoming slowly more popular. Just with the way the new rules are, I could see possibly including him.
And 1,000 points, I would consider maybe just taking him on a horse or something. Just have that behind your line.
Yeah, to get that 6-inch mobility around where he needs to be, and then of course he could be an objective grounder too. The other thing that we didn't talk about is he's kind of a slanted caster too. That's if you look at his casting, he throws Black Dart and Still Fear and Sap Will on 5-ups. So he's he's a slanted caster compared to other wraiths. So
he does cast Transfix on a 3, which is good.
That's true.
Which I think is a big one for him.
Well, it's actually funny because the next one we're going to talk about is the Tainted, and I didn't realize this, but both the Dwimmerlack and the Tainted both cast on the same thing.
Yep.
I didn't actually realize that, but they both have the same casting. And the reason we see the Tainted more often is because of the fact that he's got his 2 special abilities, I can't say that word. Miasmatic presence and Seeping Decay. So, I mean, was the miasmatic presence at the start of a move phase before heroic actions are declared. He can spend a point of will. If he does this until the end of the turn, all warrior models within 6 inches of the Tainted may not benefit from the stand fast rule, nor take parts in heroic actions. So, you're talking about how this list doesn't have a lot of might from the get-go. The Tainted is one of the ways to kind of make your opponent spend his resources without benefiting from the resources. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and
it has a lot of resource burning aspects to it for sure.
Yeah, it's actually something I ran into. One of my
in terms of like the special rules that they have.
Yeah.
If you're versing this army, you're gonna be having to spend more might, or you're gonna have to spend more will, maybe, or you're gonna, just to be able to do what you normally do against regular armies.
Yeah.
That's why I said this army doesn't play like a lot of.
Or you're gonna spend that might. Like the one time I played it, I had to spend the might against. I was playing the Tainted, and the only reason I was calling heroic movements, and I had to call it with all of my heroes in several turns. So you're talking about, I think, 6 points worth of might spent in 2 turns just to move 6 models.
Yeah.
because of the fact that each one had to move on their own, and the heroes don't benefit from each other, and nor did the warriors. So that was one of the big things from the
Um,
Tainted.
and then he has another rule, Seeping Decay.
Mm-hmm.
At the start of the
No, you're good.
you
Go
want me to
ahead.
do it?
Yeah, you go ahead and hit
At the
that one.
start of the fight phase, roll a d6 for each non-spirit model, friendly or enemy, in base contact with the Tainted. If the model is a cavalry model, roll both the mount and the rider on a d6. On the roll of a 6, they suffer a wound.
That's
And it's
pretty
similar
cool.
to other. That's similar to like other models like Sharky or like Sharku, where if you try and gank this guy with like
10 guys.
10 guys and you don't kill him because he has a relatively high defense with defense 8. Let's just
Yeah.
say you charge a bunch of warriors into him. There's a possibility that you're gonna lose a handful of guys if you can roll hot.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing is it's at the start of the fight phase too, so it's not even before you get to strike or
Yep.
attack. So I mean, you could go in there with
So-
say 4 heroes, and they could all suffer a wound, theoretically.
Yep. Yeah, I can see that being a pretty handy ability to have.
Yeah, I think the tainted is definitely the one that we see the most in this list out for the race outside of the Witch King. And some folks don't even include the Witch King. They just go with the Tainted. And then Gulliver, who's our next profile, we're going to go over in the Shade. So, Joe, you want to go ahead and talk about Gulliver a little bit?
Gulliver. So Gulliver is a pretty handsome points cost.
Yeah.
He's more than most other like heroes. I think rightfully so. So he has Fly, Harbinger of Evil, Monstrous Charge, Resistant to Magic, and Terror, which are all really good abilities for him to have, especially if you want to use him as an assassin piece, which I think most people do or should.
Yep. Like a ballistic missile.
Yep. Gulliver can regain a single wound for each model he slays in combat. Rend is the only brutal power attack that allows Gulliver to regain wounds in this manner. He can never go beyond his initial 4.
And see, that's key right there. That's his Immortal Hunger special ability, and it is an active special ability, so you can deactivate that with Transfix or with someone like Floey. But
Yep.
his attacks and his courage are equal to the amount of wounds he has. So if he's down to
Yes.
1 wound, he's only got 1 attack and 1 courage.
Yeah.
1.
Then he has Strength of Body and Will. Yeah, that's what you just said. His courage. Yep. So here's my thing. So Gulliver, he can fly. He has Fight 7. He has Strength 8. Only Defense 5, which is my biggest problem with him.
But he does have
basically,
heroic defense.
He does have heroic defense. And he has Heroic Strength, which he doesn't really need. He's Strength 8, but I think if you wanted to get to that Strength 10 to wound something big, you could.
Yeah,
so
going up against a Defense 10 model, that could be really useful.
So Gulliver, you use him like an assassin. You can fly over. So let's just say you're probably gonna have a ring wraith in this list. I think most people who play this list should take at least one of the wraiths.
Mm-hmm.
You fly over your shield wall, maybe try and hit that hero. You have your shade activated. You go in there and you kill him. You're probably gonna kill that model if you have your full wounds and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's my biggest thing about flying assassins. This has been my biggest thing of like the Witch King on a Fell Beast. You never want to overcommit that piece though.
Yeah.
So here's why if I played Angmar, I'm not sure if I would take Gulliver because I'd be afraid. A, he's a big target. If you're gonna verse anyone, siege weapons, casters, etc. He's a big target. He's a big juicy target, and a lot of people are scared of him.
Yep.
I know I am when I verse him. So I can see people pouring a lot of resources into stopping him. He's probably going to be, if you take him in your list, he's probably going to be your biggest hitter too. So
yep.
Me personally, I'm kind of like, he can do really good. And if you verse an army that's just a straight up like shield wall with not a lot of shots and some mid tier heroes, I can see that him being phenomenal. Yeah. Just go in there, boom, assassinate, fly over, boom, assassinate.
I think
I just kind of. Go ahead.
No, sorry. I think the way I would build this list is I've been building lists lately, just tooling around with stuff around the 800 point mark. I think 750, 800 is kind of the most common. Because if
Yep.
you're building a just a test list to put it on paper to see what it looks like, you build at 800. If you go to an event that's 750, I feel like dropping 50 points worth of stuff is usually not too hard to do. It's a couple cav here, maybe a banner if you're iffy about it. It's usually easy. Maybe you downgrade it from a big hero to a medium tier hero. But Gulliver, to me, I include Gulliver and the Witch King, like we said, and those are going to be your two big hitters. So one's going to be your leader, and one's going to be your assassin, and they're both 12-inch movers, so they're going to be able to fly around, grab.
Did you put them on a fell beast?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
That's how I look at it.
See, and if I verse the list, because I normally play Rohan or Hobbits or something. If I verse this list with those two assassins, it would be pretty tough, especially because if I had priority, let's just say I had to charge you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to, but let's just I'm saying like it's just, and if I had to charge you with those two big flyers that can hurl stuff, and then it would start to say, okay, well, do I need to wait next turn to charge? And then at that point, you can maybe bait me out with a guy flying. Use compel with the Witch King, fly in your two guys, kill him, then maybe get like a little cheeky double hurl off or something with the two guys. Like, to me, that's just that's the kind of plays that Angmar can do, and it's scary. It's scary as crap.
It's funny you should say that because that's exactly what happened to me in one of my Angmar games I played. It was at March at Music City last year in 2019, and it was the end of the first day. It was 2-day event, 5 rounds, and it was game 3, and I ended up losing to the guy who won overall. So I didn't feel too bad about it, but I was darn near dead on my feet, exhausted from the 6-hour drive up and then 3 games. So you know how that goes.
Yeah.
But I kind of set myself up in a position where I was trying to shoot at Gulliver because I was playing Rohan, just like you said. And I had about 16 shots with my Rohan. And in one turn, I actually did 2 wounds to him, which was really good. So I'm like, yeah, I got 2 wounds off of Gulliver. That's a big thing. Because now, like we were talking about with his strength of body, strength of will, he's now only down to 2 attacks, courage 2. Unfortunately, the thing was that I set myself up, and I was within his 12-inch range because I mismeasured a little bit. Then when he charged in, he literally hurled all 16 of my, he hurled one rider, I think, through my rank of about, it was 2 deep and like, I want to say 6 or 7 long. It was like 12 or 14 guys. Killed every single one of them on the hurl. It was brutal. Yeah. And that was just, me making a dumb mistake because I set myself up. I didn't pre-measure myself. I just kind of eyeballed it. Oh, yeah, I'm at a 12. He can't get there. He's down to 2 wounds. I'm not too worried about it. He's not throwing 50 dice at me. And then he came in and hurled me, and I'm just like, well, I just lost the game.
Yeah, and that's kind of like why, because I know like Gulliver is probably the biggest. Me and my bro, we call them wild cards. Like one piece that's like can make or break the game for you, and I think Gulliver is a big wild card. I think a lot of people that use him, and like people that I've versed using him, tend to use him relatively conservatively in terms of like the plays they make. Because you normally, when you play like a piece like him, you gotta think the next turn what's gonna happen.
Right.
Like a cav army.
Yeah, I tried to set it up with those big 40 mil bases where he couldn't get the. Gulliver sits on a 50 mil base, I believe. And I tried to set it up where he couldn't get in there, and I just lined myself up, didn't really pay attention too much, didn't pre-measure, and he sat himself down right there and hurled my one guy in the end through all like 14, 15, 16 of my guys, and every single one.
Yeah, that's like one of those games where Gulliver did make up his points.
Oh yeah, probably. Easily.
But I'm just thinking like, if I was to play Angmar, and I know how I play, if I was to use Gulliver, I would be afraid to use him in a reckless way, like where I might see like a really easy game. And not to mention, I don't think we mentioned this, but Gulliver does not have heroic strike.
No, he does not.
He's fight 7, which is a really good fight value.
Yeah.
But there are fight 5 heroes, like most men, or even there are some fight 7 heroes like Thranduil, who can strike. So if they were able to charge in against them and strike, it could be game over. I mean, so this is one of the he's one of the
him going into someone who's like fight 4, like say Ingold, because Ingold is no slouch. He can go ahead and use a heroic strike and strike up.
Yep.
And be fight 7 on a 3, you've got a 66% chance of being tied, and then a 50% chance of being above with a fight 4 hero that knows strike. And
Yeah,
him
and with
being strength 4, he's going to have a really good chance of doing a lot of wounds.
the 4 wounds and losing your attack and courage, it's just one of those things where I think you play him smart,
Mm-hmm.
you can win the game with him. You play him like he's invincible, you lose the game with him because he's not invincible. I actually think he's a balanced profile in terms of what the damage he can do, but then he has all these kind of negative things about him.
I mean, his biggest strengths. Since we're talking about it, his biggest strengths, he's also got 3 points of might. Let's not forget about that.
3
So
might, yep.
no fate. So any wounds he takes, he's taking them straight up. But to
Yep.
counter that, he gets them back in combat. So if he can go into, say, a handful of guys or get surrounded somehow, because he's also got terror. I think that's one thing we haven't really talked. This is a terror army. I think I touched.
Yeah, he has terror. He has terror and Harbinger of Evil. So everyone within 12 inches of him gets -1.
Yeah, so I mean, you're not even really needing to worry about having a Wraith in the list if that's the way you want to go. Having that -1, there are a lot of armies that use Bodyguard now, and I think Joe and I have both really tapped into that.
Yeah, Bodyguard. There are a lot of
Fearless.
like Angmar, Fearless Bubble,
Yep, like
Dane, Fearless Bubble, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but if he's one of those ones where you're just looking to go and maybe it depends on how you want to use him. Like you said, Joe, if you want to use him as a ballistic missile, you can, but he's probably going to get one shot. He's going to go in there, double barrel, going, and then he's probably going to get ganked. But if you go and use him maybe as a troop killer, Angmar usually has a very high model count just due to the fact that their warriors are really cheap. And if you just spam, orcs, you're going to have a pretty high model count. So if you're going in there and just trying to maybe kill a bunch of your opponent's models, warriors, he's going to do that really well. I could easily see him in 2 or 3 turns killing 10 to 15 models, depending on if you use hurls or, just straight up killing them, wounds on wounds, especially if you've taken a couple wounds from shooting and then you can go in there and win. Say you're down to 2 wounds, you charge in, so you got 3, you could kill 3 guys right there, be back up to 4 wounds, and then use one of your points of might to call heroic movement next turn, get some more charges in, and now you could be killing, 5 guys that turn. So there's 8 guys dead right there in 2 turns. And that could really swing the numbers for you, help break your opponent, and then you could just use your cheap orc warriors to overwhelm your opponent.
Yeah. So you want to go into the next profile?
Yeah, I think we've covered. We'll stay with these terror guys. We'll stay with we'll go ahead and talk about the Shade and the Borrow, right? Because that's
all right.
I think most of the way we've seen it played is
those are kind of the staple in a Angmar army.
I've seen a Gulliver, I've seen Shade, I've seen the Witch King, and sometimes if they've got the points, a Borrow, right? So, Joe, why don't you talk about the Shade? Because I know you like Shade.
So the Shade is a fight 1, strength 1, defense 8, 1 attack, 3 wound, courage 1, 0 might, 8 will, 0 fate model. Now you don't use his profile for white. People don't take him for his profile. They take him for. He does have Blades of Den Terror, by the way, which is 2 good rules to have. But people take him for Chill Aura. Chill Aura, at the start of the fight phase, 4 heroic actions are declared. A Shade may expend a will to activate this ability. Any model within 6 inches of 1 or more Shades suffers -1 on its dual roll. This is cumulative with other penalties such as wielding a 2-handed weapon.
Yeah, that's
So we were talking about how models in this list tend to make regular orcs pretty viable. Mm-hmm. So you plant this guy behind your orc shield wall. Let's just say you're fighting Iron Hills, because Iron Hills is a pretty popular army.
Yep.
So let's just say you 2 meet in the middle. Your shield wall versus their shield wall. You activate the Shade. You fly Gulliver somewhere. You can flutter the Witch King in there. Whatever you want to do. Activate that ability. You're now making it a lot harder for your opponent to win. The Iron Hills player, that is.
Mm-hmm.
I've versed the Shade before, and it was in the last edition, before they gave him like the 8 will and him having to use will to activate the rule. And I can tell you this rule is a nightmare, especially if you are not rolling hot. Let's say you roll a 4 highest. It's actually a pretty good number to roll. 4. Okay, 2 orc warriors, so you got an orc fighting them and then a spear support. Oh, I rolled a 4. So now that orc just beat your rider of Rohan because you tied, but then they get -1 to their dice roll. And especially it's a nightmare if you don't have might or if you don't have a banner to try and mitigate that.
Yep.
So the shade is like a staple in this army. It pretty much, I think taking one of them, I don't think you should take more than one. I think, by the way.
Yeah, I agree.
He's a relatively expensive model, points wise. He's like the same cost as like Théoden or Faramir. He doesn't hit hard, but you take him to make your orcs that much better.
His whole point is not to be used in combat. Like he said, he's expensive. And Joe went over profile. Fight 1, strength 1 attack. Biggest things about him, he's defense 8 with 3 wounds. So you hide him behind that shield wall. And again, remember, we'll get to them, but we'll just say Angmar orcs are cheap. They're stupidly cheap base. They're the same as Mortal orcs. Even if you kit them up with a shield and spear, they're the base cost of a warrior minus Tirith. So you're going to be probably at least 12 wide. So if you put this guy right in the middle behind it, you're talking about a 12. That's 12-inch diameter. He's going to cover your entire shield wall for that -1. And he's not like a Wraith where he's even if you use all 8 of his will, he's going to go poof. He's not going to go poof. But you do that 1 a turn. There's not very rarely do games go 8 turns. Let's be honest.
Yeah. And one thing that I forgot to talk about him and Gulliver is both of them are spirit models.
Yes.
So they have a 3-inch radius around them. Everything within 3 inches causes terror. So your orcs will be causing terror.
Bonus. Yeah, that's the army bonus. We didn't get to that yet, but if the army bonus is every spirit, any model within 3 inches of spirit, like Joe just said, causes terror.
Yep. And Gulliver and the Shade are both spirit keyword. So.
Yeah. So that's another thing is a lot of folks try and get those spirits in there. And that's why you'll see things like the Barrowite, which is the next profile. And the Barrowite, he's strength 3, defense 7, fight 3, 1 attack again, 2 wounds, no might, no fate, 5 will. And the reason he's got 5 will is he actually casts Paralyze at a 4-up, which is pretty darn good. And again, he's a spirit model. So if you're talking about a 3-inch range, you're talking about a 6-inch diameter. So if you've got, say, the Shade in the middle of that 12 wide line, well, you've got that middle chunk of 6. So maybe you throw a Barrowite or 2 in there on the edges, and now you're talking about your entire army for your shield and spear wall is going to be terror.
Yeah.
And you've got Harboring the Evil up going around, so -1. So unless your opponent's got a lot of bodyguard or an army like Elves that's really high in courage, value base with courage 5, it's going to be really hard for your opponents to get in there and charge. And then when they do get in there, you're talking about the Shade taking -1 to the dice rolls. It's a nightmare. I'll tell you that straight up.
One thing, too, we didn't mention is of course, all the ring wraiths are spirits, so they're going to have that effect as well with the army bonus. The Barrowite is a model that gives me nightmares because I've versed him. I versed him in the worst possible scenarios. So let's just say I versed one. I think it was up in Philly, and he paralyzed my gambling. And everyone knows gambling with his banner. You want that model to be Rohan list. So he has 1 will. He paralyzed gambling with 2 dice. Rolled a 6. I was like, all right, no problem. I rolled my 1 will. I rolled a 1. Gambling, bam, paralyzed for the rest of the game. Couldn't move. So it's just my 1, and not to mention points wise, it takes 2 Barrowites to make up the price of a gambling. Yeah. So that 1, and then the Barrowite next turn tried to paralyze Théoden. Luckily, I was able to resist that time. But Paralyze is a good spell. Paralyze, in case anyone isn't familiar, is a spell that your model basically lays down, cannot move, cannot shoot. I don't think can call heroic actions.
Nope.
If he's in a fight, he automatically loses the fight.
Yep.
And
the only so you're trapped.
Yep. The only way to get out of Paralyze is if you at the end of the turn, I think you roll a natural 6, or you can use might to make it a 6.
Yeah. I think if you have a friendly model that
They
is in
can
base
try.
contact with you and it didn't do anything that turn, no shooting, no
They
fighting.
can try and rush you up too. Yeah.
Yeah, they can add a dice to it, but it's still really hard. You're talking about trying to get a natural 6, and for someone like
Yep.
me who never rolls higher than a 4, it's not going to happen.
It's like Dan versus the Angmar at the Hendersonville tournament we went to, and the guy he paralyzed his chariot driver. The driver of the chariot.
The Iron Hills chariot. Yep.
Yeah, he paralyzed the driver, which is for that model in particular. That's a nightmare scenario because the chariot, all that thing wants to do is move. So the Barrow White's really good at. I think if you want to throw some will on a hero, or I mean, you got all kinds of other ring wraiths and stuff in this army that can cast magic. Save him for last. Move up. Try and paralyze a hero. You can make Aragorn paralyzed. You can paralyze. I don't think you can paralyze. You can paralyze a cave troll. I was gonna say I don't think you can paralyze the Balrog, but I'm not sure. You might be able to.
I mean, it's a spell. It can cast on anybody. I don't know if he would go prone. I'd have to probably read into that more for the spell. But again, it goes to like what you were saying earlier, Joe. It helps to burn resources. Even if you're just throwing a dice or two at it, you've got 5 wills. So you've got at least 2 turns with 2 dice, and then a third turn with 1. Well, you could throw it at a hero, like you said, like a Théoden, like a Gambling, where even if you're just making them burn will to resist it, and say you don't have the Witch King, right? So they're probably sitting there thinking, well, whatever, I'm just going to spend my will to resist it. But then they try to charge in. Now their courage value's down because I think Théoden, for example, since we're talking about Rohan still, is like what, courage 5 base, so he's down to courage 4.
Courage 5.
Yeah. So what happens when you roll 2-2? So now you're gonna have to spend a couple points of will, especially if it's a clutch moment where you need to get Théoden in there to get a kill. It's like, well, crap! I just spent like 2 of my 3 will last turn. Now I can't charge with Théoden. Now he's just going to sit here and do nothing.
Yeah, definitely. It's like it's the Barrow White for his points and for what he can do.
Yeah,
I think taking 2 of them in an Angmar army is a pretty viable option.
No, I think it's completely viable. Especially again, it's like 800 points. If you're not taking Gulliver, like you're saying, I can totally see taking just the Witch King. And then having a Shade, having 2 Balrites, and then maybe a couple of these guys. Let's talk about real quick. And we're actually going to jump out of heroes to talk about this guy. And this is a warrior, but it's the Dead Marsh Spectre, which is another spirit model. However, you don't get that Terror Bubble because he's not a spirit hero. He's a spirit warrior. But the Dead Marsh Spectre's another one of those ones that's nothing to laugh at. I don't know. Have you ever had to go against Dead Marsh Spectres, Joe? Yes.
I versed the first Nova Open I ever went to. I versed a guy who was playing. He was playing Mordor, but he had like 5 Dead Marsh Spectres in his army.
Oh, Jeremy. Yeah.
And
I played against him.
He's like, okay, have this guy make a courage check. Okay, pass. Next guy, have this guy make a courage check. Okay, fail. All right, let me move this guy over here. Let me go make a courage check with him. And it's actually basically what
I was talking about is actually the special ability of the Dead Marsh Spectre, and that's a Fell Light is in them. And what you do is at any point during its move, a Spectre can choose a single enemy model anywhere within 12 inches and line of sight. So he's got to see him. That's key. If a model must pass a courage test or make a full move under the control of the Spectre's controlling player, even if it has already moved. This move cannot be used to enter an enemy's control zone or perform actions that would cause direct harm to the target, such as jumping down a cliff. It may also not be used to have the target dismount or lie down. Affected models may move no further that turn and may not use active abilities for the remainder of the move phase. So that's pretty big. So you're deactivating active abilities, and you can move somebody and really screw up someone's line, you know.
And I think that here's like where I think Dead Marsh Spectres. I think they're rather expensive for troops, especially for the stat line they have.
Yeah.
I think maybe 3 of them. If I was playing Angmar, I'd probably put like 3 of them in my army.
Yeah, I think that's completely doable.
So I'm like thinking for what you can use them for. So for starters, you can use them to move enemy models off of objectives. So let's say you're playing domination.
That's what.
The last 2 turns of the game, I need to get these models off these objectives. Okay, go and have this model make a courage check. Oh, you fail? Okay, then we move you off that objective. Another scenario I can see this being good in is to pull a model out of a shield wall. Could be a hero. To gank him with Gulliver, for instance. And then the third option I can see this being very viable in is if you're versing. So, in terms of shooting, Angmar doesn't have a lot of shooting in them. You're probably gonna have to go to your opponent.
Yep, you have to. Yeah.
So I'm thinking like you can use Marsh Spectres to move models in front of archers. So if you're versing a good player, let's just say you're versing a good old-fashioned elven gun line. You okay? Go make a courage check with that elf. Let's say they fail. You move that model in front of a couple archers so they cannot shoot past that model into your shield wall.
Yep. So I mean, there's a lot of ways. What you were saying, Jeremy, I think it was Jeremy Smith. I'm sorry if I'm remembering his name wrong. Chicago guys, you knew him
Yeah.
very well.
Yeah, Jeremy. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
he.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. He took a lot of shade.
Yeah, he took.
Or Spectre action. Sorry.
Yeah, I think he had 2 or 3 of them, and he literally walked a handful of my guys off of objectives in the game we played. Just the entire game, just came up, and I was playing fiefdoms at the Nova that I went to. So it was Blackroot Vale archers that he was doing it on. So Courage 2 Blackroot Vale archers were just walking backwards the entire game. Every time I try to, even if I got priority and we were able to go hop back on the objective, okay, courage check. All right, I rolled 7. I needed an 8. Okay, move them off the objective again. And I mean, that was it. Again, it's like we said back at the very beginning of this. It's not a power hitting army. There are some models that can do it, and we haven't talked about one. We're going to talk about next. But it is a finesse army where you've really got to use the special abilities of everything and tie it all together to win games. And I really think that this army can win almost every scenario. One scenario it might kind of struggle at a little bit is killing scenario. But if you've got your army built right, you should be able to do that.
Yeah, so if and here's like one of my biggest things about Angmar is if you get everything off 100%, making your opponent burn resources, but you still get the ability off, like magic or having moving models off objectives, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Then they're perfect. There are going to be games you play with them where you're like, okay, well, I literally can't get anything off because my opponent is rolling natural 6s to resist spells.
Mm-hmm.
They're making all their courage tests. I think dwarves, Iron Hills would be a tough army for Angmar just because of like all the stuff they have.
Yeah, and the fact that they're defense 8, so your shield wall, even if the one thing that is going to help mitigate bad rolling, for example, like myself, is just Shade's ability is just automatic as long as you spend that point of will. So you're going to have the ability to still win a shield wall. Now it's going to be harder, obviously, because strength 3 against something that is defense 8, since we're talking Iron Hills, is 6x4s. But if you're winning every turn, or we'll say 90% of the combats, just because of the fact your opponent can't roll a natural 6, or can't roll a 6, even if he gets it naturally due to the -1 penalty, you're going to eventually be able to stack it up and get the kills, I think.
Yeah, and I think it kind of allows you to play a war of attrition with dwarves, and eventually Iron Hills is a pretty elite army, and eventually you're going to kill enough guys to make that difference.
Yeah, and especially if you got like Gulliver or the Witch King running around there, because someone like Iron Hill, since we're on that, usually only has one big hero, and that is Dane. So you can use your Witch King on a Fell Beast and keep him away from Dane, which is easy to do with 12-inch movement. You can go ahead and really wreak some havoc while having your shield wall kind of just whittle down the other opponent's shield wall. So, but yeah, that's all the spirit models, and we're gonna hop back here real quick. I'm just gonna touch on these 2 heroes just because they need to be talked about, and that's the Angmar Hero Captain, Angmar Hero Shaman. So you do have the ability to take a Captain and a Shaman. It's just a generic Captain, an Orc Captain. The biggest difference between the Shaman is usually they have Fury. This one doesn't. It has Wither and Instill Fear. And Wither is the one where I think it's -1 to your strength, or does it take you to 1? Do you remember, Joe?
I actually never looked at that spell. I think, to be 100% honest.
I think Wither is the one where you take -1 to your strength, and if you channel it, your strength goes to 1 and remains that way. Because you can't get it back.
It's a pretty good spell then.
Yeah, because think about it, if you could take it against like a Boromir, because Boromir is one of the big heroes out there. That even with a lance bonus, you take him to strength 1 on a channeled Wither, that could be really huge. And then the other spell is Instill Fear, which is the one where if you have to take a courage check. If you fail the courage check, no, that's not Instill Fear. Yeah. If you fail the courage check, you have to move away or something like that. Or is it the
And still fears the one where you make a courage check, and if you fail, then your model backs like 3 inches back directly away from the caster.
Like I think it might be like a 3-inch bubble. Everybody within 3 inches of the caster.
Yeah, it's a small bubble, but it's really effective.
Yeah, that's it. He calls it. You have to take everybody within 3 inches has to take a courage check. If they don't, then they move directly backwards, their full movement away from him, unless impeded. So I mean, it's not bad. It's again one of those terror things. So you're already talking about -1s from Harboring Evil and stuff. So Still Fear could be a good one. That could be another one where you could just get the shaman in position on an objective scenario and just make your opponent back away. Yeah, those are the 2 orc heroes. And then our last hero that we have, and this is, well, I'm sorry, there's 2 more heroes, but we'll talk about this one.
Can I chime in real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
There's one orc hero that I actually think is a very viable option for this list that you actually can't take. It's Gulliver.
Oh, yeah.
Gulliver, yeah. I just read his profile. So like he's about the same points as a regular orc captain, but he has 2 will, no fate. He does have heroic strike and heroic challenge. He's a hero of fortitude, and he can be mounted on a warg.
Yeah.
His special rule is impressive girth on a 5+. So if he takes a wound on a 5+, this wound is ignored exactly as fate was spent.
So that's kind of like, that's like the Goblin King ability.
Yeah, and he can't use that for special rules. He can't use this against magic powers.
Yeah, a Gulliver is one that you can take in Angmar, but if you take Gulliver, he can be the only named hero you can take, if I remember right. Yeah, I think he's in the Scouring of the Shire book, isn't he?
Yes, he is. He's in the appendices.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So he technically is part of the Angmar army.
Yeah, you could take him in Angmar. He's a hero of fortitude. I think he'd be, in my personal opinion, I think he'd be a better pick than a captain. Granted, a captain I think has heroic march.
Yes.
But Gulliver also has heroic strike, which, depending on what build of this list you play, I think having that ability to heroic strike is pretty key.
Well, and see, and that's the next hero I was going to talk about, and this is my favorite hero just because I like them, and that is Burner, Troll Chief.
Yep.
And he has heroic strike. And he's got several. He's got strike, strength, and challenge. And he's a hero of valor, so he could challenge up to a lower legend class. And
he can challenge like all the little small fighting heroes because they're all valor. He can challenge a boatload of heroes. A lot of heroes are valor.
Yeah, he can challenge and take them on and do a pretty good job. But he's one of my favorites. I mean, he's a troll. He's fight 6, strength 6, defense 6, 3 attack, 3 wound, and he's got 3 might. So I mean, his biggest weakness is the fact that he's only got 1 fate. But hey, that's what's going to happen. He's probably not going to be your leader. So I mean, you're just banking on the fact that you can use him He's a mini Gulliver. I mean, that's how I look at it. He's a cheaper Gulliver. He's almost about half the cost. He has a pick, which to me is, if you guys don't know, picks can do piercing strike. So you're talking about the ability to maybe give up a little bit of your defense to, get up to strength 7? So depending on what you're going against, that could be really useful. You know?
Against like a Gondor shield wall or something.
Gondor, dwarves, or like some of the dwarven heroes, they're defense 7. That could be really useful. And then he does have strike, so just because he's fight 6, he can get higher than that, and he's got the 3 points of might. And he does have terror. He does have throw stones like most trolls do, but I don't think you can really use this guy to throw stones.
No, probably not.
Yeah,
you probably want him to be front and center.
Yeah,
moving forward.
It's like we were saying earlier. This is an army that's probably going to be moving towards your opponent in pretty much every single game. Because of the fact they don't really have shooting to speak of. You can take bows with the warriors, but they're not really good. It's orc bows, let's be honest.
Can they take trackers?
They cannot. Okay. They can just take warriors and riders.
Yeah, so the way I see the Angmar, like if I was to build an Angmar list and go to a tournament tomorrow, I would take the Witch King. I would probably put him on a Feldbeast. I would probably max out a warband of him with some orcs and specters in there.
Yep.
I would probably take a shade. No, I definitely would take a shade, sorry.
Yeah.
I would probably take 2 Barrow Whites. And then I'd have to look, so okay, I'm thinking I got 1 big hitter with the Witch King. So I'd either try and put my other points onto Birder, and then some more troops, or I'd consider putting it onto. I would consider trying to shoehorn Gulfimble in there as well. That'd probably be a little expensive for Gulfimble.
You can't get Gulfimble.
Oh, he can't go on the list. He can't be on the list.
No, because if you include him, you can't include any other.
Named heroes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then never mind. I wouldn't put Gulfimble in there.
Yeah.
But I think the Witch King's good. I think if you don't take the Witch King and you want to take one of the smaller wraiths, then you take Gulliver.
Yes.
Because I'm like thinking points wise, between him and the Witch King, it's like 400 points. So there's half your army in 2 models.
Yeah. It's more than that. Yeah.
Yeah, more than half. For 800 points, you probably can. Orcs are cheap. You can probably get 2 full warbands of orcs. And then you're like, okay, well, I got maybe a barrel wipe, but then you don't have the shade kind of thing. So I think this is what I'm talking, like if you're going to build an Angmar army, considering like how small it is, like profile wise, you can actually play it a lot of different ways. So like you could take Gulliver, you could take the shade, you could take a wraith, you could take birders. Some people, Dan versus the guy up in Hendersonville, he had the shade birders was his main hero.
Okay. Well, and see, here's the other thing too is we didn't talk about these, but you actually could take cave trolls in this list.
Yes, cave trolls. They take hand and half hammers. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean,
there's
not only that, you're talking about some guys that actually do have some hitting power too.
Yep.
So
there's an old battle report. It's on the DC Hobbit League YouTube, where a guy took the Witch King on a horse, the Crown of Morgle. He took a shade. He took a barrow white. He took birders, and then he took like 5 cave trolls. And that was his army.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's one of those armies where you're probably gonna get outnumbered, but your army hits really hard.
Yeah. Well, and then there's also the one way you can build it too. If you're looking, because I think the biggest thing we've talked about so far is the lack of mobility. You can take warp riders in this list.
Yep.
But you can also take the Wild Warp Chieftain. He is part of this, and the Wild Warp Chieftain's pretty cheap, and because you can also take Wild Wargs, and you're talking about if you just take the Wild Warp Chieftain as a hero of fortitude, and then give him maybe, I don't know, I'd say 5 or 6. 6 sounds like a good number. You have 7 guys running around. You're talking about 130-ish points worth of movement 10 guys that are strength 4. So that's one of those things where you can use those guys as kind of like not so much a flanking maneuver, but the ability to run and grab objectives. So think about Ages of Heirlooms Past or Reconnoiter, for example, where since we're talking
Fog
about
of War.
so far, Fog of War, we've talked about it so far. You're talking about keeping a shield and spear wall, and then walking it forward to your opponent and hoping you don't get shot down too badly. Well, you can do that and then use these other guys, these Wild Warp Chieftains, these Wild Wargs, to flank your opponent and then get some traps once you get up there, or flank around and grab objectives like we were just saying. And so there's a lot of ways that you can build this list to mitigate some of the weaknesses, and movement is weakness. I don't think there's any way you can mitigate range. They just stink.
If I was like I said, if I was to build a Angmar army to take to the tournament tomorrow, I probably wouldn't put any bows in my army.
No,
I would put it. Yeah, I would take orcs with spear and shield, orcs with shield. Take the heroes to talk about, and that's another thing about this list in terms of mobility is the Witch King and Gulliver, and if you take the Tainted or the Dormalac on Fellbeast, they all can move 12 inches and fly. So if you have to take an objective in like the last turn of the game, then they can all do it pretty easily.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where that's one of those things where if you do have Gulliver and the Witch King, you want to try, like I said, if you want to use Gulliver as a ballistic missile, send him in there, have him go in, both barrels blazing, and do what he needs to do to eliminate a big hero in the first couple turns, but then he gets ambushed and surrounded and killed. So be it. But if you played a little more strategically, you can save him to the last turn, do exactly what Joe just said, and go jump on some objectives. But so I pulled up my army builder. I used the Lonely Night army builder while you were talking there, Joe. And as you know, we have our 1,000 point event coming up that I'm hosting in February. And I just threw together a quick list, and I didn't include any warrior models just because of the fact that I was looking more at the heroes. But at 1,000 points, I included the Witch King kitted out, I gave him my version to kit it out is Fell Beast and the Crown of Morgle. I don't do the Morgle Blade, and then Gulliver, a Shade, one bar, right? Just one, because I also
Yeah.
squeezed in Birder for a little
Yeah.
bit of Strength 6 hitting.
Yeah.
And then I think from there I'll probably drop in maybe 2 Deadlock Spectres to get like we talked about. And I mean I'm sitting at like 700 points, so you've got almost 300 points to use there for very cheap troops.
Yeah, it works and works.
Yeah. So
Um,
you could easily get this army list to, I don't know, 40 models probably.
that's not bad considering you got 3 heavy hitters. 2 of them are strikers, and then you got all the Angmar controlling ability with a Barrow White, with the Spectres, with the Shade,
Yeah.
and the Witch King on a Felbeast with magic of his own.
So let's see. I'm doodling away right now. So I'm up to 971 points, and I'm at 43 models.
Okay.
And so I've got like 4 Warg Riders, and then like just everything else is 2 Dead Marsh Spectres, and everything else is just sword and board guys, you know.
Yeah.
So.
I think 1,000 points. That sounds pretty scary. Like if I was to play 1,000 points in versus that 1,000 point list, I'd be like, what threat am I gonna try and go for first? Birders?
Yeah.
Witch King? Gulliver? No.
Yeah. And then in the
So
meantime, while you're trying to go after them, you got the Shade in there throwing.
yeah, you got the Shade and the Dead Marsh Spectres and the Barrow Whites just trying to mess your day up all over.
Yeah, so it's a very scary list at 1,000 points when you can get everything in there. You can really get that army synergy going.
And it's like in terms of like how Angmar, like the way like I see it is it's like a control army. So like most armies, like when you're playing Rohan, when you're playing Gondor, you just go in there guns blazing. You just run in there into combat. You know depending on what build you take, you can make your opponent come to you. Angmar is one of those armies where you go to your opponent and then you just shut everything down they have, and then crush them. That being said, you can misplay them.
Yes.
Yes, you can. And I think that's probably like if you play Angmar, it's probably gonna be a learning curve. So like an army like Lake Town, where you have that one big piece like Bard, and your whole army depends on Bard and his banner and stuff, and the synergy of your heroes. You can misplay that. You know, just to think that this list placed first, has placed at a couple of tournaments. Don't think that you could pick it up and then go win games automatically. So I think like you have to learn how your pieces work together, the synergy. But I do think it's a very solid army, and it can win. I think it can win all the scenarios too. It's like Goblin Town, where I can see it winning almost every scenario.
I think it's more forgiving than an army like you're talking about, since you said Lake Town, where if you lose Bard for some let's just say ridiculously speaking, Iron Hill shoots the ballista and then hits Bard, does 1 wound, and you fail to prevent it, and he dies. Because the Iron Hill's ballista is a large siege engine, so any wounds done is an insta-kill.
Yep.
Well, now your army's going to fall apart. Whereas with, I think, Angmar, if you lose the Shade, that's going to hurt, but you can still make it work with the Witch King, with Gulliver, with the Terror Bubble from having those bar rights in your army. You're still going to cause terror. You're still going to do -1. You're still going to have all that going on. And conversely, if you lose Gulliver, like we said, you can still use the Witch King to make the Witch King work. Now let's not talk about losing the Witch King, because that's your leader. I would hope that you don't lose your leader, but it could happen. And even in that, if that happens, your army's still going to work if you have the Shade up and running. You're going to be able to wear down your opponent through attrition with the -1 to their dual rolls, and hopefully overwhelm them over time and win by killing their army. So it's one of those ones that I think I haven't played it, so this isn't coming from any area of expertise. It's just coming from my opinion. I think it's a little more forgiving, but you have to know how to play it. I definitely think it's a top tier army, and it's not for novices. To put it bluntly, you need to know the game a little bit, and you need to practice with it.
Yeah, definitely. I think if this would be like my last point. if you decide tomorrow, you wake up, you're like, I want to play a new army. I want to play Angmar because I heard they're pretty solid. I would recommend you buy the models you want to use. For me, it'd be the Witch King. It'd be, just because I think he'd be an integral piece in the army.
I definitely agree with that. Hero legend.
Yeah.
Even if you
Yep.
do somehow get broke, instant courage check. Yep.
Yep. You build your army, and I say you get with your friends and you practice with it as much as you can.
Yeah.
Now, when you get good with it, your friends might not like you so much because you're tabling them.
Joke with wrong joke.
No, but I think it's a good army. I just think it's a finesse army, and it's not. If you went from playing Iron Hills to playing Angmar, you're probably gonna be like, well, what's this? I'm losing models. But it's just par for the course.
Yeah, and it is actually one of those lists too where, like I was just saying, at 1,000 points, I'm looking at 40 something models, even with 5 big pieces. And you could probably get more models in there if you took out a couple of those pieces, if that's not how you want to do. You're going to lose some of the models because the fact it is more horde based with the cheap orcs. They're only defense 5 with a shield. So strength 3 shooting is going to, wreck them. And the fact that you are going to have to go to an opponent, if you've got a heavy opponent or heavy shooting opponent, they're probably going to sit there for a couple turns and take shots. I'll be honest. I played. If you guys have watched our video, I highly recommend you do. When we went to the Asheville tournament that Joe was talking about, the what was it, the Dry Falls of Walrus.
Yep.
I took the ranges of Faramir's Rangers, the Range of Ithilien list, and all I did was sit back and shoot. So an army like this is going to want to come to me very fast. So you're probably maybe thinking about putting in a captain just to have 2 turns of march where you can move 18 inches in 2 turns to get to me to make me stop shooting so much. Something like that. You're just going to have to accept that. You're not going to have a lot of shooting to go back, but losing your models, it's not going to be that big of a deal because you're going to be able to make it up once you get in there with all the synergy of stuff going together.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think like if you're charging, let's just say Isengard, a lot of crossbows, or whoever, you start losing models. You got to think when you get in combat, you're probably going to be able to. First off, they're probably going to have Saruman unless they're playing a horde of the heroes. But yeah, I think it's a good point. I think it's a good army. I definitely recommend checking out. It's an army I've actually bought some models for. I thought about playing. I'm just waiting for the shade and stuff to come back out and
I actually
Gulliver.
have all the models. I just haven't built it or painted it yet because I don't like painting evil armies.
Well, I mean, you can lend them this way, and we can do Angmar.
I'm sure
Angmar Battle Report.
Maybe we will do that. That's probably not a bad idea. Battleport to go along with this.
We could do Angmar versus Arnor or something.
Yeah, there you go. That would be thematic too. I'm sure, there's actually probably a few narrative scenarios for it.
Yep.
So, but yeah, I think that's about everything. We've covered all the profiles now. Some of them we gave a little bit more love to than others, but I think we hit everything. We talked about sounds like we've covered almost everything we've experienced. Joe, you got any last thoughts you want to add?
I'll say this to if you're gonna verse Angmar, I would say this: be very cognizant of where you put your heroes, because there will be an attempt to get assassinated. By possibly many different avenues.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I can say that playing a couple times. The 3 times I've played it, 2 times my opponents used Gulliver as the ballistic missile, like we were talking about, and they assassinated not Immortal. I think it was Forlong one game, and then somebody else in another. But you got to be careful. So be careful, like Joe said.
That's one of those armies where you're gonna just anticipate something's not gonna go your way.
Yeah.
At least once.
If it's me, it's every turn
now. All right, guys. That's my last point. So.
All right, everyone. I appreciate y'all hanging out. This is a long one. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I think we talked about a lot of stuff. Shout out to Azrael94 for asking for this one. He is actually one of the folks who commented on one of our prior videos saying, hey, I'm working on building Angmar. Can you give me some tips? Can you make a video? So, Azrael, sorry for the 2-month delay. Talked about that at the beginning. Hope you can understand. Happy 2021 to everybody. This will be our first video for 2021. And look forward to us coming back shortly here, hopefully, with our next army. And we will be doing a good army. Not sure what we're doing. Maybe we'll do Iron Hills. What do you think, Joe?
Iron Iron Elves would be a good one. It's a pretty common army to see on the table. So
I think, and we've both played it, so we got some experience there. Maybe we get Dan
Oh, yeah.
too. So
Yep.
All right, guys, we're gonna wrap it up. Thanks for following us. Thanks for watching. As always, leave comments below with any questions, any suggestions, anything that you want to see or hear, any corrections that we have made mistakes to. And
probably will be a few.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Enjoy your hobby, guys. Take it easy.